So, hello, Vincent here. So, working on building my own web application framework that I've been working on for a while now. But one of the things that I'm coming up with right now is how to make sure that the database schema, the table schema that I'm working with, is what I expect it to be and it needs to be. So, an interesting parallel between software and um, psychology and how we think about things is that essentially who not be drawing this parallel, but essentially the way that the software, the most common way we store things in with software like web applications is through a database. Essentially, how we actually structure the information in the database determines how we can actually make sense of it. And the same thing with in our mind, like how we perceive the world around us, and how we actually store it in our minds, how we actually perceive the information that's coming into us from the senses, and how we actually determine it and distill it into like schema within our minds to actually make sense of it within our minds. So how we present the outside world within our minds. So that's essentially what databases do. Now here's an interesting challenge that I'm coming up with, is that how do we know that the database schema that we're working with the web application framework is appropriate for what we need and is what we expect it to be? So for instance, what I'm doing here is the database schema for the authentication process for the web application. So essentially, when you log in and how they know it's you, so they're managing the passwords and hashing all that stuff, and knowing that when you log in that that's actually you, and then and also authorization. So like, what are you allowed to do, given who you are? So one of the key things that you need to do is like understand, is the table schema set up properly, so that is the database table set up so that the information that we need is actually in there. So basically, what I've done here is like, and it's work in progress, but essentially a way to check the table is actually the tables are actually set up the way they need to be, and this is basically what it looks like on the web application. So it's got so essentially the authentication table. So it's comparing the tables that the table columns that we have versus the table columns that we require, and so exists basically means the table name exists and the column names exist, and satisfied means that is comparing the column definition, that essentially the create table column definition, with the database type name that we actually have. So just I guess a really basic way to actually compare the database table setup to make sure that it's actually what we need. And why is this important? So like, as I mentioned before, how we represent information in a database determines how well we can actually work with it and how we can actually use it. But then, more importantly, we actually build applications on the data, or build software on the data, and we need to, in order to do that, we need to know exactly how it's represented and how we can actually manipulate it, what information's in there, and how we actually make sense of it. So, because when we're building applications, we are highly dependent on what data we have and how it's structured. So that's why it is really important to actually make sure that the database is set up exactly the way we need to. It's like it's the foundation for building a house. Like we need to know that everything's set up exactly the way we need it to be. So basically that's what I'm working on here. Basically a rudimentary way to actually check is basically just comparing the column definition with the expected database type name that comes out. So I'm using the Golang, the SQL package, and with PostgreSQL. So yeah, but yeah, it's a really fundamental way to look at like what do we expect the database tables to be, and how can we make sure that it actually is what we need it to be. And it's a vitally important thing to do with not just software, but basically anything you do. Like make sure that everything is set up the way that you need to do. It needs to be set up. So and there's just a way to check that things are set up the way they need to be set up. So anyway, that's me for this video, and I look forward to catching you in the next one. Gotta think of a better way to finish off my videos. Anyway.